Mara Okafor arrived at the house on a morning so bright it made the marble look like ice. The security guard tapped a button, and the glass door sighed open. The air changed at once, cool, lemon clean, the faintest hush of a place that prized order above breath. Outside, the Atlanta sun threw heat in waves off the driveway. Inside, the world held its breath. She stepped through with her canvas bag folded against her side and her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She did not look around. People who hired help noticed those who stared. They trusted those who listened. The living room could have been a museum-white seating like sculpture, a fireplace that had never known a single ash, a wall of book spines chosen more for their jackets than their words. A man waited by the unlit hearth. Even still, he looked like motion held inside a frame tall, trim, a navy suit that fit the way glass fits a window. His hair had gone silver at the temples in 2 neat strokes. He wasn't beautiful so much as exact. "Miss Okafor?" he asked. He did not offer a hand. He did not have to. Men like him didn't often touch the world they owned. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm Evan Calder." He said the name without announcement, like it was a fact on a page she might file later. His voice didn't reach for friendliness. It was efficient. "They tell me you're discreet, careful, good with large houses." "I do my work quietly," Mara replied. "The job is straightforward," he said. He kept his gaze a shade left of her face, as if courtesy were a rule he'd learned by rote. "We've had a medical situation. My wife is recovering from an invasive treatment. She needs rest. The household needs stability. You'll keep the house in order and ensure she has what she needs. I'm in and out due to work. We have a nurse for the technical aspects. We need someone to make the days livable. Think of yourself as the rhythm section, steady, unobtrusive." Of course. His mouth tipped in something like gratitude, small, practiced. "The compensation package is in the folder. Wing room off the kitchen hall is yours if you accept. We keep a strict privacy standard. We also keep a strict schedule. Do you have any questions?" "Only one." She kept her eyes on the seam where the floor met the baseboard. "Do you want this house to feel like a home, Mr. Calder? Or like a hospital that smells nicer?" The question surprised him. She saw it in the quick blink. For a breath, he looked less like a portrait and more like a man who had not prepared for a pop quiz. "A home," he said finally, as if testing the word. "If it can be." "It can be," she said, and felt the familiar weight settle in her chest. The weight she had learned to lift and carry so no one else would see it. She accepted. A chauffeur with a face like a shut door escorted her down a polished corridor, past abstract paintings that matched the upholstery, and into the staff wing. Her quarters were small but clean. A single bed, a dresser, a window with a slice of magnolia tree. As the chauffeur left, she glanced through the gauzy curtain toward the main staircase. A slim figure stood at the landing, indistinct behind light, not watching so much as present. The idea of presence mattered. Mara set her bag on the bed, pressed her palm against the cover as if to flatten the day's first ripple, and exhaled. She had promised herself years ago to take jobs that asked for her hands but not her heart. It is a promise working women make when the world has taken too much. But promises made out of grief have a way of unraveling where they are most needed. By morning, she dressed in the uniform laid out for her. Soft gray dress, clean white apron, hair caught at the nape in a firm twist. She checked her shoes for shine. She measured her breath. She moved like water that had learned how to be quiet. The east wing held the master suite, a hush of lavender and pale wood. The bedroom door stood ajar. Mara knocked and waited, counting 3 beats before pushing it gently open. A woman lay propped against pillows, her skin the color of porcelain left too long in the sun. Her headscarf, oatmeal-colored, knit sat slightly askew over thinning hair. She looked to be in her late 30s. Pretty once, perhaps beautiful, but beauty had been edited down to bones and large, careful eyes. The sentence of illness had placed its period at the edge of her mouth. "Good morning, Mrs. Calder," Mara said. "I'm Mara. I'll be assisting with the household. Mr. Calder asked me to check whether you needed anything." The woman turned her head with the effort of a swimmer breaking the surface. "Please," she whispered. "Call me Lena." Mara refilled the water carafe. She straightened the duvet, trimmed the stems of peonies that had begun to droop on the nightstand. She did not speak. She learned the music of machines, the faint click of a pain pump, the low hum of an air filter. She learned the language of a patient's face, the way the eyes tighten when nausea approaches, the way the mouth tilts when the world swims. The nurse came and went, efficient as a metronome. The husband appeared in the evenings, set down a leather briefcase, kissed his wife's temple with lips that trembled and then did not. Days arranged themselves into a sequence of small rituals. Mara warmed hibiscus tea, the petals giving up their red like bravery steeped in water. She added a slice of ginger and a spoon of honey. She opened the window a finger's breadth so the breeze could rearrange the air. She placed a record on the vintage turntable by the bookshelf, low enough that silence could share the room. She watered the orchids on the sill. On a rain-soaked afternoon, while the nurse reviewed a chart and Mr. Calder answered emails in the den, Lena studied Mara with the attention of a woman who had nothing left to prove and everything left to notice. "You move as if you're afraid of leaving footprints," Lena said finally. Mara glanced up from the tea tray. She was not sure whether she was being teased or told. "It's habit," she said. "Some places expect noise to announce you. Other places punish it. Quiet can be a kind of safety." Lena huffed the ghost of a laugh. "I lived so loud before this. Travel, press, dinners. Now a drop of tea feels like an orchestra." Mara smiled. Not the smile that made customers feel at ease, but the small, private one that happens when 2 people share the secret vocabulary of the same ache. If anyone asked, Mara Okafor would have said she did not carry personal history into other people's homes. That was the line she drew with a steady hand. But memory isn't luggage, it's gravity. It holds you even when you think you've set it down. Her mother's name had been Miriam. She used to come home from the night shift smelling of antiseptic and cinnamon gum, her nurse's clogs squeaking a little on the kitchen tile. She had the kind of laugh that could turn a long day back into a life. She did not complain. She did not make a fuss. When she began dropping weight, she called it stress. When her eyes turned the yellow of old paper, she called it the flu. People who work too hard learn to negotiate with pain, and pain learn how to win with politeness. By the time the word "no one would say" pushed itself into the room cancer, it had already eaten its portion and asked for seconds. There were forms to fill and specialists to meet and a schedule to obey. But the end, when it came, was not dramatic. It was ordinary in the way all endings are. Machines sighed. A nurse adjusted a dial. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed at a joke. Mara left work faster than she had ever moved. She arrived a handful of minutes after her mother's last breath. There are many flavors of grief. Guilt tastes like metal. Years collapsed on themselves like folded linens. Now, in a large, cool room that did not belong to her, a woman with thinning hair pressed her lips together and fought not to cry in front of a stranger. "Do you mind?" Lena asked, already reaching for the edge of her scarf. Mara shook her head and sat beside the bed. She untied the scarf with fingers that never tugged, never rushed. Underneath, stubble and patches, tender scalp like a map drawn in pencil. She did not glance away. She did not pretend. She fetched a basin of warm water and a cloth, smoothed lotion over the irritated skin, pressed the scarf she had brought from her bag into Lena's hand-soft cotton, breathable. "This one won't itch," she said. Lena's eyes filled, not because it hurt, because it didn't. "Thank you." Her voice made a long, fragile bridge out of the two words. After a pause, she added so quietly the room had to lean in. "You know what this is, don't you?" Mara nodded. "They all say procedure and phase," Lena murmured, as if naming it feeds it. "It does," Mara answered, "and sometimes what hurts more is what nobody says." Something shifted then, not a transformation. Shifts are usually smaller, like a hinge deciding to give after too many years of holding. They kept to their roles, employee and employer's wife, but they began to share the silence as if it were a table where two people can sit without needing to explain why the food tastes different. Mr. Calder Evan at work, Sir in his own halls, noticed the change before he knew how to name it. He dealt in systems, cause and effect, efficiencies. He had engineered a logistics network that could route medical supplies across the state in hours. He had built apps no one had asked for and then made them indispensable. He trusted graphs, but graphs do not show the variables of the human heart. He started pausing in the doorway more often. In the evenings, he found himself standing at the threshold while the record player spun something slow, while the light from the window made a halo on his wife's newly smooth scalp, while the woman in the gray uniform sat in a chair with her hands relaxed, not fidgeting, present without performing. Mara did not look at him long when he drifted there. She was careful with husbands. Careless eyes start rumors. But even cautious attention could not hide reality from a man who had run out of illusions. His wife breathed easier when Mara entered a room. She ate more when Mara arranged the plate. She laughed, small, real, when Mara mispronounced the name of a plant and then learned it right. Then came the day the world turned a shade darker, as if a cloud had parked over the house and would not move. Lena woke exhausted, the marrow-deep kind that steals muscle and mood in one motion. The nurse had warned them about those days. "Expect weather," she'd said. "Sometimes it storms for no reason you can see." On those days, the woman who had once delivered keynote addresses to packed auditoriums could barely cross the room. That morning, she did not try. The breakfast tray went untouched. The scarf slipped to one side. On the pillow, a small gravity of hair. Lena turned toward the wall so she would not have to see herself becoming less. Mara entered. She took it all in, the air like glass, the untouched tea, the little proof of loss on cotton. She did not speak. She adjusted the blanket. She set the music to nothing. She sat. It is hard to sit with someone else's sorrow without offering the wrong tools, platitude, pep talk, problem solving for a thing that is not a problem. Mara had learned the difference between help and hurry. She had learned it the worst way and then the right way. She placed her attention in the room like a hand on a shoulder and left it there. "I hate the mirror," Lena whispered, voice raw. "I hate that I can't find myself in it anymore." Mara swallowed the ache that rose in her own throat, a tide with a known coastline. You are still here, she said. Not for long, Lena answered. So softly, the words felt like dust. There are moments in a life when the past walks in and sits down as if it has been there all along. Mara felt it then, the fluorescent corridor in a county hospital, the click of a wall clock, the paper cup she had crushed in her hand when a stranger had said, "There is nothing more we can do." She had learned to live after that, but she had not learned how to forgive herself for the distance she had failed to cross fast enough. She stood, nodded once to Lena, and left the room without explanation. She walked the length of the corridor, past a painting that imitated rain, past the sitting room with its unread magazines, into the bathroom attached to her small quarters. She looked at herself in the mirror, the tight twist of hair at her nape, the face she had taught to show patience and not the effort required for it. She opened the drawer and took out the clippers. She did not cry. Sometimes the body knows an act is both a fall and a flight, and can't decide which to prepare for. She set the clippers on the counter. She plugged them in and listened to the hum rise like a far-off hive. She touched the back of her head. She waited until the shaking in her hands stopped. Then she went back to the east wing. Lena had rolled onto her back, eyes open but far away. When she saw the device in Mara's hand, she flinched as if a loud sound had broken the quiet. "What are you doing?" she asked. Mara did not answer. She stood at the foot of the bed and clicked the clippers on. She held out a towel with her other hand and spread it over the floor. Then, without a speech, she lifted the blades to her own head and drew the first path. The sound was small, startling. A lock fell, then another. Her hair slid down the curve of her neck and landed like soft punctuation by her shoe. She moved slowly, careful of the tender scalp beneath, careful of her own breath. She passed the clippers from left to right, as if mowing a lawn no one had tended. She did not look in a mirror. She did not need one. She knew what she was doing. She was saying, "I see you," in a language the world could not mistranslate. Lena watched, hand pressed to her mouth. The first tear rolled down at the third pass. By the fifth, it was a stream. She did not sob. She did not speak. The machine hummed. Hair fell. The room received it and did not object. When Mara finished, she clicked the clippers off and set them on the dresser with a sound like a period coming at last. She wiped the small bits from her shoulders with a towel. Her scalp shone in the quiet, the curve of her skull elegant and honest as a moon. The door opened. Evan Calder froze on the threshold. His eyes registered first the clippers, then the landscape of hair on the floor, then the two women, his wife in bed, the housekeeper standing tall, head bare, expression sacramental. "What," he said, voice low and too steady, "is happening here?" No one had trained him for this. He knew what to do when a server crashed, when a contract failed to deliver, when a board demanded an answer. He did not know what to do when grief found its way into his house wearing the garments of love. Mara did not lower her eyes. She did not pretend there would be a way to explain that would fit inside the syllables he preferred. She did not need words, Mara said. She needed someone to see her. "This is how I say I do." He looked from the hair to his wife to Mara again. "By shaving your head? In my house?" The first crumb of anger cracked in. "No," she said, "by staying. This is just a visible way to tell the truth." He opened his mouth, closed it. He turned toward Lena, seeking in her face an anchor to a life that had been drifting for months. Lena nodded once, tears steady. "She stayed," she whispered. It was the simplest sentence, and it undid him. He swallowed and tasted the moment for what it was. A test of control in a place where control no longer applied. Mara set the clippers down and lifted her chin, not defiant present. "I was not there when my mother died," she said. "I missed it by small minutes. I let my fear of hospitals be bigger than my love. It has taken me years to call it what it was," she breathed in. "When I saw your wife, I saw what I had not done then. I do not have speeches to offer, only this. I am not leaving. If there are rooms where time slows, there are rooms where it stops." For a few breaths, the present refused to move. Evan stepped back, hand on the doorframe, then backed out into the hall as if the air had become too dense to draw. The door closed with hotel quiet. The mansion changed that night. Not in the way furniture changes when you drag it to another corner, but the way a house changes when people begin to treat it like a place that can hold a soul. The dining room's long table, polished to a shine that repelled fingerprints, cradled a bowl of bread that went warm to cool while a man sat and did not eat, thinking of hair falling like leaves and a woman he barely knew standing with the courage of a lighthouse. He did not sleep. He sat in his office with the lights off and listened to the whole place breathe. The servers in the basement whispered their data hum. The refrigerator sighed. Somewhere in the magnolias, a nightbird made the same sound twice and then decided against a third. He watched the blue bars of the router blink, and for the first time in years, he understood that some problems do not want fixing. They want attention without agenda. In the morning, he stood outside the bedroom and knocked. "Please," he said when the door opened. "May I come in?" Lena smiled without effort for the first time in weeks. Mara set down the pill cup she'd been organizing, but did not leave. "Stay," Evan said. "I need to listen." He drew the chair closer to the bed and took his wife's hand in both of his, as if learning it by memory again. He apologized, not with the many words he could summon for shareholders, but with the few that mattered here. "I have been handling logistics," he admitted. "I thought if I made the path smooth, the journey would hurt less." "I never needed smooth," Lena said softly. "I needed company." He nodded at that, and something in his face, something that had been clenched since the first diagnosis, let go. "What happened to your mother?" he asked, without looking away from his wife's eyes. Mara told him. Not every detail. You do not share the whole archive the first time a patron asks to see the reading room. Just the part that showed the shape of the story. The night shift, the slow decline, the last call that came too late, the way silence followed her like a second shadow afterward. She said her mother's name. Saying it out loud in a stranger's house was either a betrayal or a blessing. She decided on blessing. When she finished, no one spoke for a while. Air filled the spaces words couldn't manage. Lena reached for Mara's hand. Evan sat back, his gaze moving between them, and saw not for the first time, but as if it were the value of presence that cannot be coded into a product. From that day forward, the house adjusted its posture. The nurse still came and charted and helped. The chef still delivered bland soups on doctor's orders and, occasionally, a contraband lemon bar when Lena looked like she needed rebellion. The schedule of medications remained. But between the items on the list, life began to thread itself. Mara kept making the tea. She learned to tuck a small sprig of mint at the rim of the cup, because Lena smiled when she caught its scent. She put fresh flowers in narrower vases so they didn't look like arrangements and more like wild invitations. She placed a short book on the nightstand, with chapters that ended before nausea could interrupt. She found a hat with a soft band that didn't pressure tender skin and left it hanging from a peg by the door where Lena could decide each day whether to wear it without being prompted. Sometimes she spoke. More often she let Lena speak or not, as the day required. She learned the way pain has its own weather and how to pack for it. Quiet, warmth, patience. Evan learned, too. He started leaving his phone in other rooms. He learned to sit on the edge of the bed and not start sentences with, "Have you tried?" He learned how to ask, "Would you like me to?" and mean it. He learned that his wife was not a project. She was a person. The distinction should have been obvious. Busy men often need tutors for the obvious. One evening, Lena said she wanted dinner at the table. It was a small sentence that carried the weight of a return. Mara helped her dress in a soft cotton wrap that did not itch. She tied a gold scarf around Lena's head and smiled at the way it made her eyes brighter. Evan rolled up his sleeves for no reason other than to look less like someone wearing a suit to his own life. They sat three, across the glow of candles. The china glimmered. Outside, Summer's first cricket rehearsed a single note until he had it perfect. For a long moment, no one spoke. The quiet was not something to be solved. It was something to be shared. "Thank you," Evan said finally. He looked at his wife as he said it, and then carefully, with the respect late lessons require at Mara, "For what you've done for her, and for what you've done for me." Mara did not answer with a speech. She nodded once. Some acknowledgments are bells better rung than sung. Days folded into weeks. Treatment followed its schedule. Good days like windows thrown open. Bad days like lead weights in the bones. On the good days, Lena walked the corridor and back, arm looped through Mara's as if they were cousins on a church sidewalk. On the bad days, Mara read aloud or said nothing, or placed her palm against the back of Lena's hand and let the skin-to-skin truth do the work words could not. Letters appeared first in Lena's lap, then on the dresser, then tucked under a coaster. Not addressed to anyone living. To the baby she had not had. To the girl she had once been. To the woman she hoped she might still have a chance to meet on the other side of this. Mara found one of them folded and left on the pillow after Lena fell asleep. She did not read it through. Privacy is a kind of love. But her eye caught a line. Sometimes what saves us is not what someone does for us, but what someone is willing to do with us. She closed the letter gently and slid it into her worn paperback, a book she carried from house to house because it gave her something to hold that wasn't a memory. The city turned toward autumn as if obeying a conductor's baton. The magnolia leaves dulled to leather. The light slanted like wisdom through the bedroom window. The house's scent shifted from lemon to nutmeg, from new to lived in. Lena's hair began to return as a tender shadow. She stood longer at the mirror and did not flinch. When she looked now, she saw not lack but survival. There is a difference between what the world considers pretty and what a life considers beautiful. She had crossed that border and did not ask customs for permission. One afternoon, Mara sat at the little desk by her window in the staff wing and wrote in the leather-bound journal she'd kept hidden beneath folded t-shirts since the day her mother died. The handwriting had always been neat, tight lines, tidy curves, because order felt like the only defense against chaos. She wrote about hibiscus tea. She wrote about silver at the temples. She wrote about the way grief does not leave a body. It becomes the muscle you use to lift someone else's. She did not write Lena's name or Evan's. She wrote home and meant this house. She wrote stay and meant herself. Lena found her once, pen stalled above the paper, A smile lodged against her mouth like something new to try on. "Do you still dream?" Lena asked, leaning in the doorway, scarf tied like a crown. Mara kept her eyes on the page. "I do now," she said. They sat in the garden that evening, Mara and Lena, and watched wind touch the leaves and then let go. Evan approached without a suit jacket, which in his world was the equivalent of a confession. His jaw carried deliberate scruff, the kind of unkempt that means a man is learning to prioritize differently. "May I?" he asked, indicating the bench. They made room. He sat. For a while, the three of them simply watched the late sun smear itself on the far trees. Finally, he spoke. "I used to think love was fixing the things you could see," he said. "Making sure the pieces fit. Making sure nothing creaked. But you," he glanced at Mara, "you taught me that sometimes love is the choice to stay in the creaking." "Especially then," Mara said, and met his eyes for what felt like the first time on even ground. He reached for his wife's hand, then held the empty space of the other out toward Mara, a question formed by fingers. Lena took his right. Mara looked at his left, at the life it represented. Money, power, control, and then at the man offering it. She set her hand there lightly. It is not every day that three separate stories decide to stitch themselves into one. No vows were made. No contracts were signed. The quiet did the binding. The days that followed were not a montage of victory. There were recurrences of pain, a fever that frightened the nurse, an infection that demanded a week in the hospital and a forest of IV lines. Evan discovered that the waiting room chairs were designed to humble the spine. He learned to bring blankets that smelled like home. Mara learned which hallway machine offered the least offensive coffee. She learned the names of night nurses, the ones who pour extra kindness on people without visitors, the ones who can make an alarm stop shrieking without making you feel foolish for asking. Hospital time is its own country. The clocks mean nothing. The windows are stories told by people who never met the patients. In that strange country, Mara sat with Lena through the 3 a.m. hours when fear grows a backbone and announces itself as fact. She spoke softly about ordinary things when the extraordinary was too much. The new baker at the corner shop who powdered the lemon bars too generously. The neighbor whose dog pulled him down the sidewalk like a parade. The magnolia blossoms that waited a full week longer than last year to open. She made the world small enough to hold. Evan learned the new arithmetic, not revenue and burn, but counts of good mornings and minutes of comfort achieved. He paced less. He asked the nurse fewer procedural questions. He started saying, "How are you?" and letting the answer be complicated. When Lena came home again, thinner and a little wobbly, the house received her as if it had been practicing. The bed had new sheets she had not had to tolerate a salesperson for. The pillows held the shape of rest without trapping her. On the nightstand, a vase with marigolds laughed quietly at the medical equipment and did not apologize. On a Wednesday orange with late light, Lena asked Mara to pull the clippers from the bathroom again. "For me this time," she said, voice half shake, half steel. Mara did, and together they chose not to be tugged along by each reluctant strand. When Lena looked at her reflection afterward, 2 bare-headed women looked back. She smiled at them both. Then she cried. And for the first time since this began, the tears were not entirely about loss. Some were about choosing who gets to define beauty. They were in the garden the next afternoon, tired and warm and newly brave. when a neighbor stopped at the fence line and called out hello. The neighbor's eyes flicked, quick as gossip, to the two smooth scalps shining like truth. She opened her mouth on that sound people make when pity arrives uninvited. Evan stood then, not to block the view, but to stand in the same frame. "Beautiful day," he said to the neighbor, and meant it. The neighbor's mouth changed shape. She waved, chastened by kindness, and went on. "Thank you," Lena murmured. "For what?" he asked. "For standing with us, not in front of us." He nodded. Men with experience in boardrooms are trained to lead. It takes a different kind of courage to learn to accompany. Winter made the mornings thin and blue at the edges. A fresh scan went better than the worst guesses, and not as well as the best prayers. The oncologist used words like watchful and cautious and plateau, words that seemed to distrust happiness. It did not matter. Some days you accept the good news you get, and do not question it in case it notices and leaves. They celebrated by making soup from scratch. Evan chopped like a man who had just discovered onions. Lena sat on a stool and dictated amounts like a general handling the last good battle. Mara moved between them like a metronome with a heartbeat. The kitchen filled with steam and garlic, and the sound of three laughs that used to be strangers to one another. A few weeks later, Lena asked Mara whether she wrote letters to her mother. "I did," Mara said, "for a while. Then I shouted them in my head. Then I stopped, because silence can feel like peace even when it's just surrender." "What would you say now?" Lena asked. Mara pictured it. "Dear Mama, today I learned that staying is another word for love. Dear Mama, I found a job that pays attention. Dear Mama, I wish I had arrived sooner, but I am here now where I can be, with who needs me." "I would tell her I'm finally learning the kind of brave that matters," she said. Lena reached over and took Mara's hand. "You learned it a long time ago," she said. "You just didn't have a place to use it." The words landed with the precise weight of a key in a familiar lock. Spring made itself at home on the property, and then, mercifully, inside the people living there. The magnolia flowers opened and then failed to apologize for their extravagance. The bed was less an island and more a couch. The record player continued its service as a gentle tyrant, insisting on songs that made the hours honest. Sometimes Mara found Evan standing beside it, not doing anything at all. Every house needs a corner where a person can admit they do not know what comes next. One evening, when the sky had gone mauve and the first bats were stitching their arcs between the trees, Evan returned from his office with a small box. He set it on the table and pushed it gently toward Mara. Inside lay a scarf, the color of early morning ocean made of cotton, so soft it felt like mercy. "I thought," he said, clearing his throat, "you might want something of your own. Not to hide, to choose." Mara touched the scarf. "Thank you," she said, "but I think I'll keep choosing this for a while." She ran a hand over the smoothness of her head. "It tells the truth at a glance." He nodded, embarrassed by his own relief. Gifts are often as much about the giver's need to make amends as they are about the recipient's need to receive. He had meant well. She had answered better. Lena reached for the scarf instead. "May I?" she asked Mara, who smiled and tied it around Lena's shoulders rather than her head, a swath of ocean at her collarbone. They ate on the patio, soup and simple bread, and listened to the frogs literature had not warned them about. No one raised a glass to the future. Toasts can burden a hope. They nodded at the present instead, shared and complete. On a quiet Sunday, when church bells downtown sent their measured courage into the air, a letter arrived with a return address from the county hospital. A volunteer had found it while cleaning out a storage room, unclaimed possessions boxed without ceremony. The letter contained a single photograph of Miriam Okafor, taken on a staff holiday party Mara had not known about. In the picture, Miriam wore paper antlers and laughed with her mouth open, the way she always had when life sent her joy. The volunteer had written, "I think this belongs to you." Mara held the photo as if its edges might bruise. Then she took it into the East Wing and showed it to Lena and to Evan. She told them the story behind the antlers. She told them how her mother had shown up tired and still asked about other people's days. She set the picture on the dresser beside the peonies. Lena saluted the photo with her teacup. "Thank you for raising the woman who found us," she said. Evan did not salute. He stood for a long time looking at the laughing woman. Then he said, "I wish I could have met her," in a tone that made the wish sound like a vow to meet whoever needed meeting from now on. Mara realized then that her mother had indeed been present in this house all along, not as a haunting, but as a helper, the way love that has lost its body sometimes reappears to finish the assignment. The story did not end with a cure that made people clap. It did not end with a funeral that made them cry. It ended the way most lives do when they are lived on a human scale, in a day you could have missed if you weren't paying attention. The three of them sat in the garden again, where this particular chapter had taught them how to sit. The wind braided itself through the trees. The hydrangeas bragged without consequence. The letter to the self one hopes to become lay half-finished in Lena's lap. Evan's shoes were off, evidence of a man learning to step more softly. Mara's head shone smooth and unabashed in the light. Evan took Lena's hand. He offered the other to Mara. No speeches, no music. Just the quiet that comes after a long noise. If anyone had asked each of them what they had learned, they might have said different words that meant the same thing. Lena would have said, "I am not what I lost. I am what I survived." With Evan would have said, "Fixing is not loving." Staying is, Mara would have said, nothing, and in that nothing the lesson would be complete. They held on a little longer than necessary, and then let go together. The day went on. A bird took off and did not fall. Somewhere down the road a child practiced the piano and missed every other note, and none of it mattered. Inside the house, the hall mirror reflected what it had been given, a home that had learned how to be one. The living room no longer looked like a museum. It looked like a place where laughter might happen and not need to apologize to the furniture. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon again. The master bedroom kept its vigil with less fear. Mara rose and took the empty cups inside to wash. She moved down the corridor the way she always had, quiet as a promise kept, and left no footprints, because she had finally learned that the best evidence of a life is not the mark it leaves on a floor, but the lives it steadies in passing. And for the first time since the day in the hospital, when time had beat her by minutes, she did not feel chased by the word, "too late." She felt exactly on time. Sometimes love doesn't calm the storm. It sits beside you until the wind passes. Mara, Lena, and Evan remind us that presence is medicine. A warm cup, a steady hand, a silence that tells the truth. We aren't defined by what illness or regret takes. We're shaped by the courage to stay, to witness, to begin again. If you carry guilt, set it down by showing up for someone today. If you feel small, remember quiet kindness can hold a house together. Who stayed for you when life creaked, and who did you stay for? Share your story in the comments. Your words may be the lamp someone needs. If this touched you, please subscribe and tap the bell to join our Everyday Miracles family. More uplifting stories are on the way.